A lot of my focus is on strategy and execution. So whether it's tonight, we're going to talk about SEO, but typically if an organization comes to me and says, "Hey, we're trying to do these things," what I try to do is find the best strategy to help them do whatever it is they want to do. Right. So it's that's probably the thing that gets me most excited. And I think it's always curious to sort of think about not in some ways, you always have to think of yourself as a startup. So even if you're established and you've been doing some of these things for a long time, are there still things if you were a startup that you might do that you're not doing now in a better way? Even when I work with huge organizations, I think there sometimes you can get so entrenched in what you're doing. So that's the strategy. And then it's sort of like what matters. And the example that I shared with Abby a long time ago is I had a website, I had a designer build it, I paid thousands of dollars for it. It was beautiful. It was different than anything in Pittsburgh that I had seen. People loved it, but I was at a conference and the person outside, we were in a break, and the person said, "Is your phone ringing?" No. Are you getting any leads? No. But the website looks really cool. And that was really the start of the journey for me personally with SEO, because it was, is your website getting traffic? Is it the right traffic? If you're getting the right traffic, are they actually taking an action? So that's where those meaningful results. You'll get into social, you'll talk about digital, and people are still trying to figure out what success looks like. But I think it's really important to, always think about, are the right people coming to my website? Once they're there, are they doing what I need them to do to make it whatever results are important in my business? I also work with helping marketing teams within organizations. So sort of as an outside consultant coming in and helping them figure out how to drive their sales growth. So that's just a little bit about me. We talked a little bit about your challenges. The things that I see a lot are just, I don't have enough time, right? Like most people don't have an SEO department, a marketing department. A lot of times you don't have anybody else, it's you. And so it's really can be stressful to figure out what are you going to do with that lack of bandwidth and internal resources. Another one is sort of on one hand, it's great because there's so much information, but on the other hand, that's horrible, right? Because there's so much information, it's confusing, it can be overwhelming. Because it's been democratized, everybody can sort of do it, and that can be a challenge for you because you don't know exactly who to listen to, and it also changes. And then for almost all of us, right, even if you're just focused locally, there's so much competition, it's hard to really stand out. So you have local competition, you have national competition. Some people, depending on the type of your business, have huge databases. So you have e-commerce competition, you can have directories, these big directories that still take so much of the SEO because they're like these huge juggernauts. And so that's a factor. We talked a lot about keywords, and that's still sort of a big piece of this, right? So when you're like, well, I don't really know, but I know about keywords, the idea is sort of there. Then the question becomes, are you able to think like your customers? So there might be the things and that you think they're searching for, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily how they think about what you're doing and how to find you. So it's sort of finding that intersection between what you think they're doing, and that's something I think organizations don't do enough is just talking to your customers and understanding what they look for, how they find you. I think it builds relationships, and there's sort of a treasure trove of information. So I highly recommend every opportunity to talk to your customers. And then sort of, okay, I have these keywords. I don't have a lot of time. Like, what do I talk about? Right? Should I blog? What should my content focus on? So those are the things that I've seen. Any surprises there, or anything anybody would add?
International competition.
Well, you add a layer that it will be interesting to think about that. Even with Google Ads, some of the Google Ads stuff that I do, you can specify language, but I don't do anything. Like, I've yet to run into a client that's dealing with multilingual or non-English campaigns. So yeah, that could be a definitely a challenge. So tonight we'll talk about just some high points of the what and why SEO terms, writing your content, thinking about those keywords, some research tools. Some of them are free. Most of them will have almost more information than you'll ever need, because it just, you can sort of get buried in keyword research. SEO reviews, and then sort of how to measure your success, some potential costs, and a recap and Q&A. Now, the one thing I'll say to everyone is, and everybody's journey is different. It's as much as SEO. The thing I like about SEO is you have some amount of control over it, right? So it's your website, and you saw this early in social media where there were people. There was a time when social media was super effective as a marketing platform, and so you build your whole business on Facebook, right? And you'd pay designers to make a special Facebook graphic and the page, and then all of a sudden one day you go onto Facebook and they're like, hey, we're going to change that, and you have no control over it, because even when you're advertising, is if you've done any of that with Google or with Facebook, you have very limited input in what's happening, and sometimes you don't even have complete insights into what's happening. So the good thing about your website and organic is, Google can change this, AI can change the way people are searching for things, but you own it. And I think that's always your hub. So you always want to sort of base everything off your organic traffic, but don't forget about all these other areas. And it's going to be a little bit different. I think it's not going to apply to everybody, but for me as a consumer, the Google My Business profiles are huge. Like, do you have one? If it pops up, how many reviews do you have? Do they seem credible? And I do that quite a bit. That's sort of a me thing. Obviously social media, but it is important as you're looking at that to look at which, if you're using different platforms, are any of them driving meaningful traffic to your website? What can you glean from that? I'm a big fan of earned media, so I don't think you necessarily need to reach out to like a local magazine and do an advertorial where you pay them $1,200. You write the article yourself. But if you build relationships, we were at the Entrepreneurs Growth Conference at Duquesne a couple of years ago, and there was this lady that developed, I think her husband snored, so she developed these, I'm almost sure the name was ear muffers. They're like earplugs, and she was so passionate, and we were in this session about how to pitch her business to the media, and it was like it was fantastic, right? She had a fantastic story, and you could tell the media in the session were like eating it up back then. So those can be industry publications, they can be local publications, but you can use social media and sort of gain relationships, and that can also help your organic traffic, because those things will live on well after the article comes out, and those things can build your ranking, your website, based on if they're coming from credible websites. So that's a piece. Some people will use Google Ads, for example, on the other side, and depending on the type of your business, you can accelerate your SEO because you can get a little bit clearer picture of what's happening with keywords and search terms and everything, sometimes with Google in conjunction with your organic, and then sort of bring those two together. I still think email can play a role, and then obviously word of mouth referrals. But for some of you, it can be conferences and events. If you're doing executive coaching, maybe that makes sense. Sometimes it's if you were dealing with you had products, like sometimes trade shows, like if you were still doing the animal portraits, you might be at I Made It Market or somewhere else locally. So think of that continuum of all the things that you can do to generate website traffic. But I know tonight we're talking about organic, but it's easy to sort of lock in on that and forget about all those other things. That makes sense? Okay. So SEO. So historically, and it's still sort of the case. So Allison, if I Googled, and we'll look at this example in a little bit, but if you look at some of let's just say you wanted to be found for murals, like, mural artists in Pittsburgh, I'll have to think about what I searched to sort of see what came up, just as an example. So tonight, when I look at some of your stuff, it will be all based on assumptions. We didn't have a chance to connect before this. I don't know exactly what the most important aspects of your business and what you want to focus on. So when we look at some examples in a little bit, it's just sort of, I'm going to apologize in advance. But like, if you look at the Pittsburgh mural artists, let's just say, a lot of them, I think I looked at 3 data points. A lot of them don't have a lot of content, which is not uncommon, right? Even for e-commerce sites, you might not spend time on the product descriptions and stuff. So Google's still able to find, when I'm searching for something like that, results, even if there's not a lot of content. So some of that can be, what's in your page title for your site, the meta descriptions. Allison, you mentioned the keywords in your images. So that's literally like how your website is configured, and all those sort of technical SEO things that you would do that the search engines will consider your website findable, right? So when somebody's searching, it's trying to match up what you do with the searcher intent. Why it's the reason why I like this and Google Ads more than almost anything is because it's generally intent based, right? So if somebody's searching you organically, they're looking for whatever you do, and it's really up to you to be able to match what you do to what they're searching for. But unlike Facebook and all these other things, which is super intrusive, and you get on there and you don't want to see half the ads. So I like Google Ads and organic because pretty much if somebody's searching for you and they find you and it's relevant, there's a better chance that they're going to convert. So that's my thought on it. So search engine optimizations is how do you get traffic to your website organically where you're not paying for it. Search engine marketing is a blend, right? It's that how do you get traffic from organic and paid search like Google Ads and the search results. Keywords, obviously they're the things that you can overdo it on your website. So it's, that they'll always say you want to sort of think about your customer, and you want to I like to think about it like a conversation. So I want it to be readable so that I engage them when they're on the website. But I also want to make it so that it's not just keyword stuffing and you'll see this in the last workshop we did in the fall. There was a competitor that had, I call it like a keyword salad, where they did a good job, but they had it in the link at the top. They had it in the page title heading. They had it, sprinkled different variations. And it maybe read a little clunky, but Google still sort of teed them up as they weren't one of the Rebloom companies, but one of the competitors. So it's that fine line of I want to be relevant. I want to create a readable experience where people are engaging with my content. And then the other thing that I think goes into the artificial intelligence and just sort of what you see if you're searching now is sort of this idea of zero-click content where the search engines are scraping your website. I had a conversation with, there's a Chinese restaurant in Cranberry, and their hours on Google My Business were incorrect. And they were basically selling themselves short like a half hour every day, where they said they didn't open until 11:30, but they opened at 11. And I was like, you got to change that, because I just give away free advice. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And the owner was like, well, no, go to my website. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, the majority of people never get to your website because they're going to see those hours and they're going to call or not call. And if that's 30 minutes a day, that could be, just how many, it could be hundreds of dollars a week that they're losing because people just don't bother calling. So I do think the search engines, especially with artificial intelligence, are going to continue to take I still think your websites are going to be really important, but I think that the search engines are moving more towards, I'm going to find answers to whatever questions, I'm going to pop it in this little box, and you can decide whether you want to click to that website or that restaurant, but I'm going to try to give you everything you need right from your search. Does that make sense? And that's something I've seen. It's funny. We used to watch with ads. It used to be the ads were really pronounced. And then for a while, especially Google, you couldn't really tell what was an ad and what was organic. And now it just ebbs and flows, which is sort of interesting. But so keywords matter. I think when I was launching a website, the designer I worked with said come up with a content strategy. So think about all the things that you want to be found for, and not necessarily based on what you think, but if you sort of, which is going to be difficult, but if you think through the lens of your customer and what they might search for if they were trying to find someone like me. And some of them are easy. If you said murals or really in public art installations, for the most part, I think you can sort of zero in on that, and that can be pretty straightforward. Executive coaching, some of the stuff about the mental health in Spanish, the wrinkles of what that is, that I'd have to think about. But that start there and then sort of map out what those themes are that you want to be found for. For most people, it's funny when I talk to organizations, even huge organizations, most of them never get past the sort of fundamental stuff, right? So we'll talk about keyword research tools, but some of the things are start with your competitors. Start with, if you're looking locally, who am I up against? Who pops up when I search for different things? And then, you can see the related searches and see, well, I might have searched for this one thing, but then Google's sort of telling me that these other searches come up when somebody searches for something like this, and start to see what are there things that are obvious. So if you're not the top person in those results when you search, Why do you think that is? Like, what is it about their website? What is it about their content? Typically, what that would mean for websites is it used to be like a book. So you would have the structure of your website would sort of be the more content you had. The old school SEO stuff would be so if you had a service, you would have a page about that service, and you would just have 750 words, 1,000 words about executive coaching in Pittsburgh, right? And you'll even see this with, I didn't use this example tonight, but Edgar Snyder had a blog post, and it was best off-leash dog parks in Pittsburgh. And you go, well, maybe Edgar Snyder loves dogs, and he probably does. But if you looked at everything around that page, and you could still find this, it's also about dog bites and dog parks, right? So as an attorney, he maybe is a dog lover, but he also realizes if you go to a dog park, there's a chance your dog's going to get bitten. And if you're going to do that, so he's going to get the organic traffic for people that are looking for the best off-leash dog parks in Pittsburgh. But even I think the URL might even have dog bites. It might be in the category dog bites, best off-leash dog parks. But you can sort of get the sense of, like, it might not seem obvious at first. Why is he writing about that? But that was also sort of an old school. I don't know how old that post is, but that was the way we used to do these things, right? And sometimes it still works. Now, some of the examples I used, I wasn't sure who was going to be on the call tonight, but let's just say, for example, you sold stones and sort of ritual things, or the more specific you can get, the better. So even with executive coaching, there can be different levels of executive coaching and different styles of executive coaching. So you can experiment with this idea of longer tail, which basically just means more specific, right? So if you said something just like executive coaching, wow, your competition would be through the roof for that. Even maybe mural artists, but the more you can sort of dial in and get a little bit more specific with a few more details, the more likely you'll be to compete on that search term. So that's really where your bread's butter. Now, I've had great success with that. I wrote a post about 12 years ago about best phone services for small businesses. So if you were a small business, you didn't want to use your cell phone, and I would outrank these huge companies just because it was really specific. So it wasn't just like small business phone systems, but it was like, most affordable or whatever. So you really, and you can still do that. So that's an old school thing, but the more detailed will benefit your website visitors. But it also will help you out compete some of the bigger organizations, because you can't just compete on wildly broad keywords. Does that make sense? All right, I'm gonna take a drink. So you'll see I'm on this kick of how to use your mini ritual kit. So there is if you wanted to be in a snippet, so like if you have online products, sometimes when you're answering questions like how to use your mini ritual kit, Google will just pull up a snippet from your blog post or whatever. People will see it, and then hopefully they'll click to your website. But that also might be helpful content for your users. For executive coaching, wow, and any of those types of mental health. Again, mental health is different, I think. But if there are things that are sort of helpful information that you think the types of people you want to work with would be looking for, I think it's a treasure trove of what you could write about. And I don't know that you necessarily need to blog. Blogging is like having children, where like you do it and you think, oh, I'm committed to this thing, and then you get in like 6 months later and you're like, wow, this is really hard, I'm really tired, I don't know what to write about anymore. So it's a commitment. It's like a long-term commitment. I haven't blogged for Deep Varnish in probably 3 years. One, because there's so much marketing content out there, and two, because I do so much writing for my clients. I don't maintain as much as I should. So it's a challenge. But there was a time where I was blogging once a week for like 5 years, and I can't imagine doing that now. So think about when you get questions from customers, what are they? Think about information you can use to help them. If you do videos, the one thing that I see, a lot of marketers tell you need videos, and then you look and you do a video and it gets like 5 views. But if you're going to do that, you can post it on your website. You can transcribe it, so you're not only getting any of the SEO juice from the video, but also from the transcription, which is good. And but if there are things like Abby actually suggested, so just because it's important to you doesn't mean anybody's going to care about it or it's going to drive organic traffic. So if you wanted to have a staff feature or a spotlight or a new product, that might be really important to you, but that doesn't mean that your prospective customers are going to care about it. So really think about that searcher intent in my experience. And I'm trying to think back to, because I worked as a career coach in a previous life, if I have any tidbits for what I wrote about there. But I think there's just, people are just starving for that kind of information. So these are some tools. Obviously Google, you can, there's a keyword research tool that you can use through Google Ads that I don't think is that great. Even when you set up ads, it suggests keywords and I always delete all of them. And then the Google Ads people will tell me to use it. I'm like, it's terrible. SEMrush, the challenge with Moz and SEMrush and some of these platforms is sometimes you can use their keyword research tools for free and they'll take you to a certain point and then you have to pay for them. And then sometimes they'll make it really hard to unsubscribe because they just want you to subscribe, pay $10 a month, forget that you're using them. And then 6 years later, you've, subscribed to Moz for whatever. So, it's up to you. I think that you can do so much through your competitor research. You can do so much through your own experimentation. I think the challenge is really to have some theories of what you think will happen and then test it and then go back in your analytics for your website and see, what your traffic look like. And then you can experiment with those things. But I just think for most folks, if you're a solopreneur, it's hard to maintain the bandwidth to really, and they give you so much information, it'll sort of, your head will explode. Does that make sense? All right. Is there anything that you would add that you found successful that we didn't talk about? This is the interactive portion of the presentation.
Yeah, I found something successful with my first website. So my first website is just my name.com. And I also had a blog on that website. It was when I was in grad school. I wrote a blog each month, kind of reflecting on different things I'd learned. And one thing I did, it was WordPress based, is each one of my blogs, I tagged my own name. And so then, like, slowly but surely, like for Sammy Walker, my name came up first. And there's a lot of Sammy Walkers out there, but I think I just used it the most. So then my name and pictures were highest up on Google.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminded me, it's like a lifetime ago, but there was the Prime Minister of New Brunswick. I think his name was Shawn Graham. And there was a time when I was blogging for Fast Company and I'd get these Google alerts because I was just trying to keep track of like where I was mentioned or whatever. And it was always a battle with Shawn Graham, the Premier of New Brunswick, that I've never met, but maybe someday. Yeah, it's, and also but also like, I don't know, I don't think the one organization's here but if you search for yourself as a branded, like if you have your brand and you search for your branded, which would require somebody to know your brand, which is like the easiest, right? So like if you have an established brand, I sort of discount like what are the chances somebody's going to know that I'm Deep Varnish, right? They're going to be looking for services and then they'll get to Deep Varnish. So if you search for your branded, name and you don't come up, or if something weird comes up, like it's just something to keep an eye on, but if you can't own your branded search, that's usually a problem because that's really specific and that would require somebody who knows who you are. So, okay.
Anything Sammy, you mentioned that you wanted to have your name less to go down in the ladder.
It's mainly because this website for my business, Speak Y'all, like my old website is just really old. I haven't updated it. I want to really pare it down and kind of like archive old things and just make it like, yeah, I still own Sammy Walker, but I want it to lead to Speak Y'all instead. So that's what the thing is like, once I archive those blog posts, like how long do they stay up? And how can it move more toward like my business and more toward my LinkedIn than like my old blog?
And you could modify. You have a couple of different options, like, right? Like you could redirect, you could completely redirect. So when somebody goes to the old website, it just goes to boom. You could modify the old website so that it sort of gives an update and then redirects you somewhere else, like literally just says, now I'm doing these things, check me out. So I mean, I still have ShawnGraham.me, which was my first website.
Mhm.
And I've kept it around. It's probably 12 years old, and it's sort of mobile, right? But I do the same thing, and I use it, for me, I use it as a sandbox. Um, Although I don't experiment. So at a time I kept it around because I was like, well, I can write about things and explore ideas, but I just cut all that back, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good problem to have it and then decide what you want to do.
Cool.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah. All right. So again, none of these may apply. Wait, is one of you Blueprint? Anybody know Blueprint?
Yes, Chelsea has Blueprint.
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So here's an SEO example of on the homepage. I think you talk about sustainable leadership, right? And then you get into, let's just assume that's, you know, so I tried to align, okay, what do you say when I find you? What do you say on the website? And then some of the mixed signals potentially that you could open yourselves up to unnecessary competition. So sustainable leadership is obviously like on this other side, a whole different thing, right? And that's fine. But then you open yourself, so your competition could be leadership programs at not just universities. You could have sustainability programs at universities. You could have people like you that are doing so. You know, super, and I think this applies to marketing folks like me. And so at the bottom I put, like, you know, what do you really want to narrow in on? Is it career strategies, sustainable leadership, executives and entrepreneurs? Because I also did that although I don't know if I went to executives, but I started in marketing. I said I'll work with entrepreneurs to this, and that can definitely work. But also that's such a big spectrum that might be hard to, but it can work. So anyway, those were just sort of initial observations. But then of course I like people also search for how to flip your mindset, how to shape your mindset. So you can see that they linked you up to the idea of mindset, which is part of your brand. So I think that's all curious. And then like the sustainable leadership coaching on the other side, I was like, all right, so what comes up if that, just because that was on your homepage? But again, all based on assumptions, because I didn't have a chance to speak with anyone before this. So I know it's not. So thoughts on that? Like, well, what do you want people to what do you want to show up for? And are you getting those folks now through organic?
No, so the career strategist is just what my original website SEO was put to, which is not what I do. So that's incorrect. And obviously in my redesign, the website that you see is the 80% solution to what the Rebloom team has made. So that's all new. So what I want people, I hear what you're saying, and I've struggled with how to present this. So I coach to executive leadership performance that is sustainable, right? Not sustainability like environmental, so that becomes a problem in nomenclature. It's not necessarily a broadly understood term, but I recognize that when you say sustainable leadership, people might think, depending on what industry you're in. So I think I'm more inclined to speak to terms like executive leadership, but hearing what you're saying, trying to narrow it down. High performing teams is another thing, because I work with teams and leaders. So as far as what to put there on my main page, I struggle a little with one thing, but words to put on my SEO page, I have probably, 7 different: corporate culture training, mindset, resilience, things like that.
Yeah. And some of this will be experimentation. Like I do think how can you be the sustainable thing? I'd love to focus group this. I think it might be what they're looking for. It obviously is an important thing for you, but I wonder if that is a key piece for them. Like, because ultimately, like, you could argue, like, hopefully whatever they do would be sustainable, because nobody wants it. What's the alternative, right? We're going to do this thing, and then 6 months later, it's just going to come crashing down. So do they thinking about it? And they might, but those are the things that and you can, I used to have a boss that would say you need at least 3 data points to start to look for a trend. So you can put some feelers out there. And even as you're speaking to folks, what words do they use? You know, and I know they look at even the blueprint can be part of your brand, but is it really about a blueprint? What is it? You know what I mean? So, and you'll start to see, and then it's just a matter of lead capture. Like, okay, then how do we talk about what we do? Which is the other missing piece of, you know, even with your keywords, what do you, which actually, Allison, we're going to talk about your bio on your website, because I think it's great. Like it's you know, people want to know who they're investing in, and sort of what your credentials are, and sort of your personality and stuff. So, but anyway, so that's where I would start. But obviously, there are a million things that different directions we could go with it. But this was just sort of a preliminary poking around. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Chelsea?
thanks so much. I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Now, let's just say this is Soology's not on the call, right? Yeah. So let's just say that they were, or this could be any company, but let's just say that was your brand, and I search, and again, these are wild assumptions. So Soul to Soul Integrative Healing might be the same person. I have no idea. But sometimes it isn't. So even if you're Soulology and you have nothing to do with Soul to Soul, this is where those branded searches come in. And it's like, are you showing up, especially if I use Soulology in Pittsburgh, right? And if you're locally focused, if you're not in the top of the results for that, then we have problems. But you also see Google pops in these images. And again, some of them might not be related to you. But obviously it's just, what are all the different things that Google's teeing up? And does that fit with what I'm doing now? In this case, if you did have a product, you know, like they don't have a description for like these mini ritual kits. And e-commerce, that's all you really have. I started down the example of SEO used to be like a book where you would have chapters, and each chapter would have a bunch of content. And that's the way that the websites used to be structured, where Google would look at, what's the title of this chapter? Oh, it's about executive leadership coaching. Oh, there's a whole bunch of content about executive leadership, and it would scour that. And, you know, and so it really wanted to make sure you know, that you were really focused on it, not just trying to dupe the search engines. So the way I always visualized it was like, if your business was a book, you know, each one of your services might be a chapter, and then having enough in there for a reader, but in this case, search engines, to sort of know what you're doing. So that's just a branded. If you're in that case and you search for yourself, and what you see isn't what you thought you'd see, or you're not popping up, then look at that, because that's sort of a layup. You need to, if you're not showing up for your own branded search, like, you know, and not that this is all wild assumptions, right? But that happens. Same thing with catering. Now the thing, and I don't think they're on the call either, Abby, right? No catering. Okay.
Nope, no catering.
Yeah, but I love catering. I love sandwiches. Let's just say, and again, these are wild assumptions, but I'm also cynical, right? So this meta description says specializing in fresh catering, and I know, you know, that makes sense, but to me, my first thing is like, what's the alternative? Like, I would always want fresh catering, right? Even if you put it in all caps, I know you're trying to put some pizzazz in it, but like, there, could you get a little bit more specific? Now, the great thing about this for me is, you know, the Google reviews, you know, because the Google My Business profile popped up, and sometimes it will for you, it might not make sense, you know, in others. But again, as a consumer, I look at that all the time. I look at, you know, even what are the low reviews, and it's just people like, oh, they never called me back, versus like they're really bad at what they do. But this is I think a really good example of like, hey, the images are great, the you know, the reviews are great, but you can see in this meta description, you know, does that really differentiate Waterfall Catering from any caterer? And so you got to get to that little nugget of like, what makes you different organically, but then also from a brand, in my opinion. All right, so now who wants to talk about murals? Anybody want to talk about murals, Allison? Murals? So, you know, the thing that I wondered, because at first I was like, well, murals, because it's one of the bigger things, right? And maybe because there's just such an appetite for murals. But I was like, okay, so let's just assume that murals and public art are your thing, right? It's great. You have some examples there. I did actually, we'll pull up an example in a little bit, because I was like, I wonder what her image files are named. And sometimes the websites will, so I don't know exactly, but I think maybe there's an opportunity there. but then I said, okay, who's showing up? Like if I wanted a mural artist in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure you know these folks, right? And this looks like the Wicked might be a conglomerate of folks. But like for Shane, didn't have a lot of content, and you didn't have a lot of content. It's not like the old school SEO where each project you did had that might be there. I don't think I saw a write up, but let's just say you had some pictures. Maybe you have a little bit of a description, like the South Side mural, pretty good. That would be like, is that what somebody would search? Like maybe they saw a mural on the South Side, or versus like parking garage mural. Like, so if I had a parking garage, I was looking for a mural artist, that would be clear to me versus like, so what is the best way to sort of capture that? But let's just say that is, how can you sort of use those projects that's going to be your SEO for you, right? Yeah. And so when you look at your description, your meta description, and I think the way it's set up, you're a, let's see, do I have it? Yeah, you're a visual artist first. And sometimes I do think Google, when I was looking for that mural artist, and I'd have to go back and compare it to Shane, he might have mural artist in some, and he doesn't have a lot of content on his site either, but it's like, his visual artist broad enough that if you really want to be found for mural artist, is that specific enough, where it's not, let's just say that was your meta description, where you're specifically calling out murals isn't in that little blurb, and that could be the difference. Yeah. And then like, if this is, let's just say this is your link, parking garage -1, parking garage mural, would be curious. Maybe if you thought you want to do more of those, and you thought that's what, if I had a parking garage, that's probably what I would search. So just there, like, it goes back to your pet portraits. Like, is there, and it could be there, but I know sometimes these websites make these links crazy. So I can't speak to that. But the other thing that you did exceptionally well in pure startup mode is, number one, you have a picture that shows who you are. I think on the waterfall catering as an example, they talk about the story of the waterfall, which is great, but I want to know about the chef, right? And for you, I want to know about the artist. So, you have the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania visual artist. I wonder if people, how often, and you would know this, how often they search for visual artists versus, and even painter. So if you said Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania painter, you're either going to be a painter or the guy that's painting our family room today, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's there might be variations of painter. Art educators, a little clear. But I love the, you do the shock and awe of, like, I've worked with Disney, Pixar, boom. I've been in good housekeeping, boom. Those types of things. I was just working with a client, and they wanted a heat map of all the places they are, and they would use push pins on this map, and it always just looked like a bunch of push pins on a map. And then somebody sent them a picture from NASA, and NASA had a map of the United States with university logos as their heat map. And it was like a mic drop, where you, like, if I was trying to convince a corporation or a university that they had to be in this program, and I showed them that map 100 times out of 100, like, just the difference. So what you're doing there, and you can tell if that's working. But I think for me, that's that startup credibility of, like, look, my stuff's really good. I've also been in these things. Check the box, check the box, check the box, right? Mm-hmm. So, and you could, I didn't scour over the website, but then you can also, like, does anybody know Stephanie Strasberg? She's a photographer in Pittsburgh. So she has this really good website, and she's an amazing photographer. And I'm trying to think of the way she wrote about herself, but her stuff it was, number one, her photography was beautiful, but the personality she had when I pulled up her website just clicked, resonated, right? So it is that, what is the brand? Who are you? And how do you sort of bundle that into how you present yourself online? And it might be there. Like I said, I went through these pretty quickly, but I love that description. Okay, now I knew it wasn't working. So great job on that. Do you feel good about that page, Allison?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and no surprise here. So this is another branded example. So I was like, all right, so if I search you specifically, the you could get more strategic and try to sprinkle in some keywords on some of those pages. But like on the below here is this is murals and public art is good. But it didn't come up, and that you asked about what do you do locally, and the difference between Shane's thing. I'd have to see if he said Pittsburgh anywhere, and then sometimes it's just the weird way you search, right? Like, so based on your search history or where you are, it might pull up some things, and sometimes it might pull up something different. So, but all good stuff. I love the pictures. I think obviously such a key piece of art. So questions on any of those? I know we sort of that was all based on wild assumptions. I don't think I've said anything about the mental health in Spanish and Spanish language clients. I do think if you don't have a law firm to explore that, that can be expensive, but figure that out. And maybe Abby has some thoughts on that, what you can copyright. But if I were you, I would start with, I always start with competitors, because if nothing else, I understand what I'm up against. Sometimes there are trends, but even in some of these situations, when you do that, there might be somebody that outranks you and it just doesn't make sense, right? Like they're not following any of the fundamentals. Their website isn't mobile friendly. It's just weird. And I don't have an explanation for that. So questions so far? Anybody?
So how specifically can we find the words that would be like, if I come at it from, how do you know like what you don't know, right? So like if I know like I know visual artists, I know murals, Pittsburgh, like you're suggesting talk to people and how they would actually search for.
One would be if somebody called you up. So I'm the owner of the whatever, some space that needs a mural, right? Usually the first thing they'll say if they reach out to you is I'm looking for a blah 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 blah, and whatever they say is probably very closely related to what they would search, right? So I would come up with variations, and some of this is experimentation where it's, I don't know. My hypothesis for you would be I don't know that people are searching for a visual artist. They might be. So if it's public art, that seems more defined. I'd have to explore like what are the variations of if I were searching for public art, like what to find someone like you. The same thing for murals. I would experiment around that and see sort of some of the suggested searches that other people have done from Google. I wouldn't mess with Google Ads and all that just to do that. And I don't think what you would get from an SEMrush or some of those tools would be great. I would, if you know some people that organically you think do well, look at sort of what you think. And I'm happy after this, like if because I know we're trying to cover a lot, and I think we're almost out of time. That we could get more specific, but that's what I would do. Like, don't overthink it. But as they reach out to you, just really actively listen, and they say, "I'm looking for a such and such." That's probably what they searched. You know what I mean? Murals is clear. I think that's going to be pretty clear. I think public art, maybe. Executive coaching, pretty clear. And then it's sort of the nuances to that. Does that make sense? And in some cases, like maybe your website it's not necessarily going to generate a ton of traffic no matter what you do, but it's a credibility check. So once they're there, they find you through word of mouth or whatever. It's there. So it just depends.